David Cohen is the U.S. ambassador to Canada.
Hi, Ambassador Cohen. Good to see you again.
Good to see you. It's a pleasure to be on here. Happy fall.
Yes, you as well. Thanks for making the time for this. I saw you Friday in the gallery of the House of Commons watching President Zelensky's address, and I have a host of questions for you about Ukrainian support. But I do want to start on the big story in this country this week, which is, of course, what happened, the accusation the Prime Minister leveled in the House of Commons last Monday against the government of India that there is a potential link, according to credible intelligence he has in his possession, between the government and the murder of a Canadian citizen back in June. The Washington Post this week said that weeks before the Prime Minister's comments, Ottawa asked its closest allies, including Washington, to publicly condemn the murder, but the overtures were rebuffed. I wanted to sort of ask you very bluntly if that was the case.
So very bluntly, I will say that, and you know me well enough, that I'm not in the habit of commenting on private diplomatic conversations. Look, I will say that this was a matter of shared intelligence information. There was a lot of communication between Canada and the United States about this. And I think that's as far as I'm comfortable going. I mean, I just don't think it's appropriate for me to share publicly private diplomatic conversations. Once you do that, it's sort of hard to have private diplomatic conversations because all of a sudden your partners, your allies will worry that those conversations will be reported on the air.
Let me ask you then more broadly about how the U.S. interprets what has unfolded rather than the specifics of a conversation that took place. And by that I mean the reporting, particularly at the outset of the week, seemed to indicate like there was some hesitancy on the part of Washington to jump to the defense of Canada in any capacity or to be as worried about the potential of this happening as Canada is. Can you respond to that concern?
I can respond to that by saying, first of all, that the United States takes very seriously these allegations. And, you know, if they prove to be true, it is a potentially very serious breach of the rules-based international order in which we like to function. I think in the last couple of days, high-ranking United States officials in Washington have basically put that concern to rest in saying quite clearly that we have expressed our concern to India over these allegations and have asked India to cooperate in the Canadian investigation of what has occurred here. So this is something we take very seriously, and we think it's very important to get to the bottom of it.
Do you find it at all circumspect that India thus far has not cooperated?
So I don't know that I have the details on exactly how much India has cooperated or not. So I have to be honest with that. It's a Canadian investigation. I'm not privy to the details of the Canadian investigation, so I can't tell you that India has not cooperated. I think India's denied its involvement in this, but that's not cooperating. That's issuing a public statement in response to a potentially very serious allegation and criticism. So I don't know what the status is of India's cooperation. All I know is that in the last 48 hours, the United States has reiterated its desire that India cooperate.
They have, very clearly. And also there has been reporting that, and you mentioned sort of this idea of shared intelligence, that Canada has in its possession communication that involves Indian diplomats, and that not all of it originated in Canada, meaning that some of it came from our Five Eyes partners. Are you able to answer whether or not that intelligence came from the U.S.?
So I'm not. I wouldn't in any circumstance. I think I've already gone further than you should have expected that I'd be willing to go by confirming that there was shared intelligence among Five Eyes partners that helped lead Canada to making the statements that the Prime Minister made.
Let me switch gears then to the visit from President Zelensky, both here and to the United States, and specifically to Washington. I actually want to start off with his visit to Washington and whether you think it had any tangible effect on the people in Congress right now who do not want to support the president's request for them to approve a $24 billion aid package?
So I'm up here in Canada. I'm not there talking to the people who I, in the past, would be talking to all the time about this. So I can't really tell whether President Zelensky's appearance in Washington helped or hurt. But I think it's really important, and it's really important to point this out, particularly in Canada, and particularly in this time when you have so much noise around the edges of Republicans versus Democrats and so much apparent contention around how to proceed with a budget, with appropriations bills. I think it's important to point out that the significant United States aid, military aid for Ukraine, over $40 billion, has been bipartisan and has had extensive bipartisan support, that even now, with some background noise by a handful of Republicans in the Congress, mostly in the Senate, additional aid to Ukraine continues to receive strong Republican support as well as Democratic support. I mean, as recently as last night, Minority Leader Mitch McConnell was reiterating his strong personal support and the strong support of the Republican caucus in the Senate for additional aid for Ukraine. So you have to let the domestic politics of the day in the Congress, all tied up with appropriations bills and how that's going to proceed, play out and take it a little bit out of the background noise of what you're seeing around specifically Ukraine aid.
I wanted to ask you though, do you think it is just about background noise and playing out amid all of this back and forth around a potential shutdown? Or do you think it's some people who, yes, exist on the fringe of the party, but seem to have quite a hold, for example, over the leadership of it and House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, and potentially could delay, hold back a significant amount of aid? I mean, what ended up happening was the president could announce $325 million of aid, but clearly said $24 billion of it is before Congress, and only Congress can approve that.
Right. So again, I don't know that for sure. I think it was interesting that Leader McCarthy said that he was interested in meeting with President Zelensky because he had some questions. And after that meeting, he said that he got some answers to those questions. He's juggling a very difficult situation. He's got, he has a majority in the House, but he's got a majority by 5 seats. So almost any small number of members of his caucus can derail his majority. And he has not come out and said that he's against the $24 billion aid package. Senator McConnell has come out and said that he's for the $24 billion aid package. No one's going to mistake Senator McConnell for a Democrat. So you've got one of the 2 leading Republicans in the United States Congress strongly endorsing the president's request, and the other basically silent on it. I think that's not a bad position to be in.
It's not the same position, though, President Zelensky faced a year ago when he first visited, and everyone that was there wearing pins that represented the flag.
Right.
In your view, what is the potential impact of something like this, or further aid being held back, or the leadership role, really, that the U.S. has played in rallying allies to continue to support, especially at this juncture right now, 18 months in? If that were to wane, what do you think the potential impact could be?
So I don't think that's waning. I mean, the president,
you really don't?
The president is still the president of the United States. He's made quite clear that he and the United States are going to support Ukraine for what they need for as long as it takes. That's the language he keeps using. You're right that it is different than last year, but I would suggest to you that it's different from last year because of what I laid out before, which you have this overlay of domestic politics on top of the Ukraine aid situation. Once the domestic politics issue is resolved, I think we're going to find that the strong bipartisan support that has enabled the United States to provide $40 billion US, by the way, $40 billion US in aid, which is more than every other country in the world by a wide margin has provided. I think that's demonstrating a continued leadership, and the president came out of all that domestic background noise and still made a very substantial commitment of additional funding, which is as much as he could have done without congressional action.
So you don't see it as any kind of permanent?
I don't think so.
Impasse.
I don't think the United States is going to walk away from Ukraine, which is a country that is fighting a historic battle against Russia, against autocracy, in favor of democracy. And at the end of the day, that is something for which there is a broad consensus among Democrats and Republicans in the Congress and in the United States.
Ambassador, I'll leave it on that note. Thank you very much for your time, as always.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
You too.